Captain on the bridge.
Alright, Captains, we are back on the bridge, and today what I wanted to do was go over how to activate your DPS. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean activating 1 million DPS right off the bat. What I mean is activating abilities, firing weapons, that kind of thing. And the reason for this is I'm going to speak from personal experience. When I first started playing this game, and I was against NPCs, I would whittle the enemy shields, the hull, via just normal firing, without maybe sometimes activating beam overload, high yields, and all that stuff. And for me, I would activate all the major quote-unquote buffs right when about 10% as like the final finishing blow on an enemy ship. Until I was told, well, no, you got to keep activating your ability so that you can get the most performance out of a fight. Which I kind of figured out, of course, eventually on time, yeah. And that's why there's also a discussion to be had about trying to manage your cooldowns, making sure every buff, power, console, whatever you have on your build is up 100% of the time as much as possible, so that you can keep clicking on your beam overload, keep clicking on your consoles, etc. Having said that, it's not necessarily taught right off the bat. So what I wanted to do was, again, sort of show how I do it and how I've learned, going also over my trays, because there is a method to the madness. I know, Captains, one of the earlier videos that you see me, you just keep me hearing spacebar, but because I use Stow keybinds that will activate my abilities for me, auto-activate. I kind of touched on this sort of activating your buffs on the PlayStation video that we just did, the update. And I really wanted to do it here because this is where I usually play. Now, before I used keybinds, I was manually clicking everything in-game, like manual everything. So that came from bridge officer abilities, the consoles, everything. So this is not the be and end all. This is just more of like an introduction, because we can go deeper. But doing that, it'll take more time. And we've decided to somewhat just give a little glimpse here and there and then dive into details in further videos. I am not the first and only one that's done this type of video, but I thought I would share how I do it. So here we go. As you can see, we are on my Lexington here, the Smexy Lexi. Yes, I do call her the Smexy Lexi. So we're gonna somewhat go left to right, but not go into too much detail, like I said, because that's, again, if we do that, it'll just be a long video. So we'll first start on this window over here. Now, this is going to show you a lot of your weapons on your ship, like just little icons. Now, you see that they're outlined green. And actually, when you do that, when you're looking at your weapons here, you can actually hover over them and it'll actually show you what we call a firing arc right there. Okay, by default, those are not outlined. By default, when you start playing the game, hitting spacebar will actually fire these weapons. But if you want them to auto-fire for you, all you got to do is hover over the icon and press right-click on your mouse. That's it. As long as you see that green outline, you're good. There are a lot of players that I've come across the years that didn't even know you can do that. So, as I mentioned before, Stow is such a very layered game that it could just be absolutely redonkulous. the amount of information one needs to know. But try not to get frustrated and try to ask the questions. Search on YouTube. There are a bunch of content creators that go into deep dive into all the little details. We will as well to try to explain how we do it, but there's our first little thing that we'll go over there. Here in the next, it's not necessarily too important, but if this is your, of course, your icon for your ship, the shields, all that stuff. Now this will come into play later, but we'll go into that when we start. But here, this is what is on essentially going on right now in terms of buffs. And whenever you activate an ability, it'll show icons here and it'll just start stacking. And that's important to try to get the most performance out of your ship when you're in combat. Of course, here are the power levels. Now, you will see that my power levels here is a little different than most because, well, I'm on a torpedo boat. Now, I know when I do build videos, I don't necessarily go into this detail. Those build videos that I do is just to share how I play in-game. This is just getting a little bit more technical when it comes to the finer details, but not too much to overwhelm. Now, a majority of builds that I do are torpedo builds because I just love torpedo builds, like if it wasn't that obvious. Having said that, I don't need a lot of power in my weapons. So when you look at this icon, you can actually have this look 3 different ways. You can have it, this is usually the default here, and it'll show you the actual numbers of where the numbers are, the power levels are. There's the 2, and then there's the 3. I personally go for 3. So because I'm a torpedo boat mostly, I don't have a lot of energy weapons, or sometimes even none, but I do have one here on this particular build. But my main damage dealer is not my beam, so I would rather have more power into my engines so that I can move, especially being in a cruiser. Again, that's details. You will, once you start getting used to building your ships, you can find that you will get your own sort of balance on your power levels. Now, if it's a beam heavy, so like when you see me do beam overload or FA, or when you see other captains do that, you'll see most of their power is actually in the energy icon here. So this to weapons. So the icons here are weapons, shields, engines, and auxiliary. Okay, if this was a Saifu build, okay, you would see a lot of it in the aux. And all you got to do for this one is just drag the arrow here up to wherever. So this will actually even help your performance as well too. So depending on your build. Energy weapons go more power into weapons. Torpedo boats, you can go into engines or aux, depending on what you have going on. Saifu, aux, or engines. But for me, my torpedo, I go full shields. And here are the icons here, sorry, full engines. You can actually lock it in place too and then play with the rest of the power levels. So there's that. Of course, here's your full impulse and all that. Here's your bridge officer abilities. Okay, like I mentioned before, I would only, when I first started, I would only activate this almost at the final blow. Maybe the opening, the opening attack, and then sort of just wait until I get about the enemy down to 10%, and then start, activating all this stuff. So there's that. This ship particularly has hangar pets, so there's that little icon here. But we'll go over this in a little bit more detail. Now this is where, bottom right here, it gets a little much, and someone can look at that and go, wow, what does that all mean? And why do I have FA here and FA there and all that stuff? So when you're going into combat, the best thing to do is to activate all of your abilities before you go into combat. I mentioned this in the PS4 video. So when you're about to go into a fight, I'd say start activating your abilities, whether that be captain powers, buff powers, consoles, about 5 to 3 clicks away as you're moving in. So that you have all those quote-unquote buffs helping your performance right off the bat, as opposed to getting to combat and then activating it. That's just a recommendation. So I had mentioned this part earlier. This is going to show you what buffs you have. So we're just going to go to my row 1 here. Is the first thing that I start activating. So I'm just going to click right now. We're just going to concentrate on just manual clicking because I did this for years. Okay, all you got to do is, how I set this up is left to right. So left to right, then you have all these buffs happening. As you can see, there's timers below it. When these timers are activated, it shows that all these are activated until they run out of time. And what a lot of us like to do is stack as much of that so that your opening salvo will just go from normal weapons performance to just everything you can throw at an NPC, at an enemy that you have targeted. So having said that, my row 1 is stuff that I like to activate first. Now, this is a tactical tune. This will differ from your Eng and Psi, but then again, you will have to figure out how that works for you. I like to activate first debuffs, alpha strikes, anything that's going to boost my weapons or give me a speed boost, etc. How I have this set up on my attack is I have fire in my mark, and I try to put left to right what has the longest duration so that when all of them are activated, they're going to be synergizing together within a certain period of time. Now, I know I said earlier I was on a keybind, meaning there's an auto script that you have entered in your chat here that's going to make everything activate. So you saw me activate all of this via clicking. I'm going to now activate it with my keybind, which I have tied to my space bar. So that's one of the terms that comes on, spam your space bar. So here it goes. So I have, again, all those buffs working together. All of them are right there working. And then in that period, I want to make sure that I'm firing as best as possible. So that will just take time and practice knowing. And then, of course, when you're in the fight, you just try to keep activating these as you go along via either manual clicking or if you have a spam bar. And what I'll do, again, that's a whole nother video. There is a good video from McStew, that goes into keybinds, and you can use that. But again, like I said, for years I've been playing without that, and I just started using it last year. So what I have tied there in my 1 and 2 trays is left to right my sort of basic bridge officer abilities, some captain abilities. And then below, 3, 4, 5 are kind of major buffs that I have that I also do have on what I call hotkeys. But again, this is all can be clicked. So if let's say if I really wanted to get the most out of my damage on a big target, final boss, whatever, or opening group, especially on like elite content, what I would like to try to do is activate everything that you see here. So how I would do that, and I'll just do this manual clicking so you can see how much I can click in this short period of time. So then I have all of those synergizing together for a good 10 seconds. So the longer you have these durations up and synergizing with other activations, the better your performance is going to be. And of course, you don't always have to, but there are a lot of new players that I see that don't even activate their abilities at all, because it's not necessarily taught to them through Stowe. So again, this is just a tip video in terms of just at least making it known to players, because even till this day, I'm getting, oh, I didn't know I can activate this, or I didn't know I can auto fire, oh, I didn't know, etc., etc. So there's that. Now, how I have this set up, going back to my tray here, 1 and 2 are ones that I kind of spam. The 3, 4, and 5 trays are ones that I kind of would like to sort of activate manually, but I also have a hotkey where I can activate one row if I needed to on the fly on, again, bigger targets, and I don't want to waste on, let's say, smaller, if we're going to, let's say, we're fighting the Borg. I would rather use all my major buffs on a tactical cube or gate as opposed to a small little probe. So I wouldn't necessarily use anything on 3, 4, 5 on probes, but I would use 1, 2, maybe a little bit of buffs here and there. And so this is where you kind of get into the territory of managing your buffs, knowing how long your cooldowns are. Okay, again, that's another separate video that we're not going to get into. So how I set my tray up, again, 1, 2 on spam bar, 3, 4, 5 are major buffs to complement my 1 and 2 rows. My 6th row is more like heals and movements. And then 7, batteries, rep powers, but then you can set this any way you want, and you can have these numbers anywhere, set anywhere you want. You can actually just have this 8 if you want, or 7. Again, for me, like I said, I have this on a particular way. Now that just screwed up my whole row, so that was just awesome. And again, all you got to do is just click these numbers and it'll just bring the rows back to where you had them before. It does sometimes these weird things where it'll displace everything for some reason, but you know, that's the lovely features that we have here in Sto, but that's another video to go into in another time. So basically that's how I have mine. And that when I'm in battle, I would rather have all of this sort of be synchronizing as best as possible. Now you hear me in my build videos, if I go to Elite Argala, I will say, okay, I'm going to save my major bust for this next group. Because usually what I will do, let's say the first opening group, there's only 2 ships. I'll just use my spam bar, maybe a little bit of anything, the powers on 3, 4, 5, and then get rid of that group. And then when I go to that next group and I say, okay, save my major buffs, this is when I start spamming everything. And we'll go into Elite Argala so that captains can see. Now, this tray here, all of this you can set up which way you want. And all you got to do is when you go up here is show available skills, and it'll bring up this window. Everything that you have in terms of consoles, buff powers, captain powers, they're all going to be here. And this is why sometimes it does take a little time to build your ship out, because you have all of these to put on here to make sure that you're activating. Now, some things that you won't have to in the beginning parts of this put here is the weapons, because this is already like the triangle bolt mine there. It's already here. I don't need to necessarily put that here, and you don't see that on my tray here because it'll be auto firing anyways via my space bar on default. But even on my spam bar, I do have it to fire my weapons. So there's a quick tip there. And then all you got to do to, let's say, put abilities here is just right click and then just drag wherever you want. And now I've duplicated that, but I'm just showing how you can do that. So you can do that. Now there are advanced more tray setup in this, but this works for me for the casual play that we do nightly here on the bridge. There's a little bit of more managing of your powers when you get to the higher ends, quote unquote higher ends, because then that's when you get into like really nitty gritty micromanagement. So there's that. Again, this is just at the top right corner to show your available skills and powers, and all you can do is, again, set this up which way ever you want. And if it's easier for you, put 1 up here and then go down, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or the other way from the bottom up. It's up to you. Totally up to you. This is totally customizable. Now you'll see this little icon here is your show tray settings. This will actually allow you to add more trays if you need. I know some players that have 10 rows of these, so this will just get higher. That'll all do, just add the 10, then you can have it here. Again, you can micromanage this however you want. Again, I personally go between 6 and 7, sometimes even just 5 on my alts, but this is my main, and I'm comfortable just with the 7 and having all that there. So that is kind of the basics. Now, again, the thumbnail says how to activate DPS. Well, it is. And for the most part, and we're not necessarily talking about the high end, this is just activating your abilities, captain ability consoles, just across the board whenever. So what we'll do, just to show you, and I will go into an Elite Argala. We'll make sure we put that on Elite. And then we'll show the difference between taking one group, one NPC out with regular fire versus activating everything, and then you see things go boom quickly. Sometimes people will say that, why? I did everything you had, I copied your build, I went against NSP and nothing happened. And some of my time in game has been sort of spending time with people who are new, and I've seen that they're not even activating their abilities, or they've activated it once but then it's off cooldown and they don't know because they're so concentrated on flying and positioning their ships and all that stuff. So again, Stowe is very layered and it just takes time. So one thing I ask captains, don't be frustrated, take your time, learn the game at your pace, but learn at your own pace and then apply it and what will work for you. So we'll go into Leader Gala here. Oof. Sorry, there's still an oof because this is a Smexy Lexi, just saying. So now one thing I'll do here, actually, I've turned off what I call floaters. Let's see if I can get it here quickly here. So graphics, no display. Advance. That is in options, HUD. There you go. I think it says something about floaters here. Will it show? No, it won't. We'll just show the first two enemies here so we see. So there's two cruisers there, okay? There's two cruisers there. We're gonna go against this one first on the left, and we're just gonna fire. Okay, we're just gonna fire using my 1-2 trades. These are just abilities. Doing that. We're back and forth. Maybe a torp thread is gonna hit that one. Okay. So we can see we're taking down its hull, right? We're taking down its hull. Now, we'll go to this one and do it again. We'll take this down. So you can take down your enemy just activating one, abilities, bridge officer abilities, some captain abilities here. You will be able to take enemies down. But if you want to take them faster, that's when you synergize all of your consoles and your captain powers, your major bus, quote unquote. So, about 20 clicks away from them, like I said, aim one, about 15, start buffing up. Get into battle there. Then you see how fast we can zip through enemies here just by doing that. We've activated a lot of our abilities. We've taken care of that whole group of 5 enemies faster than we did the 2. And you see all of these are blinking because I'm activating them as much as I can. So there's just an example. Let's get out of here. Just to show it in practice. You can see visually, captains, that there is a difference between activating some abilities versus activating all of your abilities. And then you want to try to keep activating your abilities while you're in battle. Like I said, when I first started, I would wait until I whittled down the enemies until like 10% hull, then activate my major boss. So this, again, is just sort of meant to help newer players, captains. I know some of you already know this, but a lot of times while we're streaming, while we're meeting people and talking with them, how do you do this? How do you destroy that so quickly? All it is just activating your bridge officer abilities. And sometimes you'll see people talk about you're not even activating your powers, and well, how did you know? Well, some people are using parsing programs. I used to, but not anymore. That is usually a tool used to min-max your build to see what does good and what does bad, but you can also see that things are not firing or not activating as much in a duration of a particular combat time. So I know, captains, that was a lot. I just kind of wanted to give a sort of quick overview on how to activate your bridge officer abilities and what the trades, because this can be very confusing, but it's also one and the same thing if you want to. And now, You can also activate your bridge officer abilities from here, no problem. And as you can see, as I activate them, they're also actually going on cooldown here on the tray because they're the same thing. So I don't necessarily worry about this much anymore because I put all my abilities on this tray. What you won't see here in your bridge officer abilities is your consoles, your captain abilities, etc. Here, the hanger pets, I've actually just put them here on my tray so that they'll auto launch. Again, you can actually have these pets right there, auto firing or not. All you got to make sure is there's a green outline there. So we can go into further details of this, captains, but this is just fresh off the boat, getting, or I guess we could say fresh off the shuttle, into your ship, and then as you progress, start learning how to activate your abilities as you're in combat. So I know it's a lot to take in. It's not meant to be a course into the nitty-gritty mechanics and details, just to show how to activate basic DPS, activate your abilities, put your weapons on auto fire, use your trait, and what works for you to make the best of your opening attacks and your attacks throughout your combat time. So hopefully that helps, captains. If there are any questions, comments, anything you'd like to add, captains, to help other captains out, put it in the comments below, and then let's have a discussion here. Again, I'm not the be and end all in terms of teaching this, but I want to bring awareness to this because I get asked this all the time, and this is just my way of trying to help out because this is how I would answer the question regardless. So having it in a video form, hopefully people can refer back to it, can find it, especially a lot of new players coming into Stowe because of all the Star Trek that's happening. So it's just a way of us to give a helping hand and bring more enjoyment quickly to newer players so that they're not frustrated on why I can't beat this enemy here, etc., etc. There's more to be said about how also you build your ship, how you synergize, and I always say to synergize your weapons, your traits, and you can make any build work as long as you synergize it the best. But again, you're the captain of your ship. You can build your ship however you want. At the very basic level, how to activate your DPS is start clicking away or spamming your spacebar. And like I said, I will link in the description videos on Stowe keybinds if that's something you want. But I've done fine over the years just activating via just clicking on abilities and not have any real trouble and just be able to go through the content with little to no problems just doing that. Again, you also have to worry about flying, positioning, and all that. So hopefully this helps, captains. If you like this video, like it, subscribe. We'll always try to, on top of our build videos, give out helpful videos like these. And that'll also help us reach out to newer captains so that we can all enjoy Stowe for what it is. But on that note, Caps, we will leave it there.
Live long and prosper.